Good evening and konbanwa from the International House of Japan. It is past 6 p.m. here in Tokyo in the evening. A warm welcome to the second session of the Leaders Shaping the Future of the Indo-Pacific series. My name is Aiko DODEN, NHK World TV Special Affairs Commentator, and I am also the trustee member of the iHouse Japan. Thank you all for joining us. Today's topic is education and the challenges it faces in the COVID era. Education cannot be taken for granted in many countries, even in Japan as we live through the pandemic. There can be disparity in education because of poverty and/or gender discrimination. How have our speakers addressed the learning inequalities and are making the effort to turn crises into opportunities to pursue the mission of nurturing future leaders? Let me introduce our speakers today. We have Malala YOUSAFZAI, education activist, 2014 Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Malala has kindly sent us a video message specifically for this event. She co-founded the Malala Fund, dedicated to helping girls to go to school and reach their full potential. Graduating from Oxford University in 2020, Malala continues to work for the 130 million girls who are out of school across the globe today. We have Lynn Kobayashi, co-founder and the chair of the board, United World College ISAK Japan. Ms. Lynn Kobayashi is co-founder of the boarding school for high school students from across the world. And in Karuizawa, the school was opened in Karuizawa in 2014 with a mission to nurture transformational leaders who explore new frontiers and make positive impacts. And here at iHouse, we have Kathy Matsui, board member, Asian University for Women Support Foundation. Kathy is known for her work on womenomics, calling for an increase in female workforce participation in Japan. She's currently a board member of the Asian University for Women AUW Support Foundation, committed to empowering women through education, and chair of the board of counselors of the US-Japan Council. Until 2020, she served as vice chair of Goldman Sachs Japan. So thank you for joining the program today. Well, we will be hearing from Malala first. Malala has kindly sent us a video message on what she sees as the challenges facing education today. So let's hear what she has to say.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear brothers and sisters, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak at International House of Japan webinar series. Education is very close to my heart. I was only 11 years old when the Taliban banned girls' education in Swat Valley, and I could not go to school. That was the time when I started speaking out for the importance of girls' education. I knew that education was not just about reading and learning. It was more about the emancipation of women. It was about their empowerment. And I decided that I will advocate for the rights of all girls to have access to safe, quality education. Things changed in my life after that. I was attacked when I was only 15 years old. But I realized that I was at a stage where I had the support of people around the world, including Japan. I was receiving cards and letters from all around the world, and people were saying that they stand with me in this cause of fighting for all girls to have access to education. Since then, I have been advocating for 130 million girls who are out of schools to have access to education. There are many reasons why girls cannot go to school, from cultural and social norms to lack of finances for education, to lack of infrastructure, and also transport issues. So there are many issues why girls do not have access to schools. But especially in this time of pandemic, I have realized that the progress that we have made over the past few decades can be lost in a few seconds. And it is a reminder to all of us that we have to ensure that girls do not miss out on their education, especially in these crucial times. So at Malala Fund, we are working for the rights of all girls to have access to schooling. And in this pandemic, we did a research immediately, and the research shows us that more than 20 million girls are at risk of losing their education, either because these girls will be will become the financial supporters of their families, and they will be earning for their families and helping them, or because they'll be forced into early child marriages, and they will never be able to return to their schools. So it is so important that girls' education is given and made a priority at these critical times. So Malala Fund has been doing that work right now to ensure that girls continue learning while they are at home. They continue their lessons through online classes. And we work with local activists. They're called Malala Fund champions. And our champions are immediately responding to this crisis. In Nigeria, for instance, they are promoting educational lessons through the radio stations because that is the means of communications that reaches to many people. On the other hand, in Pakistan, they're promoting educational content through the national television and through mobile phones. So it is so important that we continue promoting girls' education, because in these times, like the pandemic, like this COVID, people often lose sight of important issues like women's rights, climate change, and girls' education. So it's important that we keep pushing for it, and we remind our leaders that we cannot ignore the education of millions of children all around the world. It is not just access to reading and writing, but it is about their future. It is about the dreams that they have for themselves and for their countries. If these children do not have access to education, their dreams are lost, their future is lost. So ensuring that education is given to all children is more important than ever right now. And education in general, especially for young girls, it helps us reduce poverty. It helps us tackle climate change. It helps us to reduce the likelihood of war. So education is not just giving the opportunities to girls and women themselves, but it also helps us to improve the world that we are living in. We are living in a much better world when girls and women are educated in it. So I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I hope that you will support the causes that we are fighting for. And once again, education can change your lives, and I'm sure you all know it through your experience. So let's make sure that all girls all around the world can have access to safe, quality, and free learning. Thank you so much.
Well, that was quite a powerful message from Malala. And I see Lin San is sort of giving Malala an applause as she listens. So let me just quickly ask both of our speakers for their reaction. Lin San, what stood out from her speech?
Inspiring as someone who is in education. But today I think it really struck me that she was only 11 years old when she was deprived of the right to access education and actually started speaking up. I say this because my son just actually turned 11 years old yesterday. Oh. And, I was reminded that children at such young age have unlimited potential to make changes that they want to see in the world. And it's truly inspiring.
So true. What about you, Kathy?
So I think that Malala so eloquently encapsulated what I truly believe in terms of women and girls' education is truly the silver bullet, because if you educate a woman, you educate her children, you educate the community, and you educate the world. And while we can try to solve the world's poverty issues or terrorism or famine or lack of education, you can try to deal with those individual problems, but to me, the silver bullet of solving all these problems at once is actually women and girls' education. So she just underscored that point. And I also remember she came to Japan, as some of you know, back in 2019, March, for the World Alliance for Women Summit. I had the pleasure of moderating a panel with her, but also had a private session with her and her father. And her father was super impressive, right? We all know about Malala, but we know less about her father. And basically said this really inspirational thing, which was, I did not clip her wings, right? I let her fly. And I think that is so important, that it's not just the individual women and girls, but it's their family infrastructure, letting them blossom and letting them maximize the potential. So I was so impressed by her and her father.
Right. No, I translated Malala's book. Oh, thank you, Lynn. No, I translated Malala's book, and I learned that inspired by Malala, the father started to cook. And Malala says changes start locally.
That's right.
From the family.
Exactly.
So that is so true. Both of you, both Lin-san and Kathy, share the same mission of providing equal education for all. And let me just quickly describe what Malala Fund is all about, which she spoke about in her speech. As many of you might know, Malala Fund make sure that equal access to education is available for all. This is the website. If you go to the website, you will see that on the first page. And if you go to the next page, the Malala Fund operates in many countries, including India, which you're seeing, but countries include like Ethiopia or Lebanon or Brazil. And you will see that, she has the statistics saying that because of the COVID-19, girls are falling out of education, unable to go to school. And that there is a real risk that they may perhaps never come back to school, even when this pandemic is over. So that is quite a daunting prospect that we have to really address. I am sure both of you must be facing a similar situation because of the COVID-19. So, Kathy, please tell us briefly about AUW, what you do, and possibly the challenges that you are facing.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. And if I could first slide, please, on Asian University for Women. So this is a very unique institution that is based in Bangladesh. It was founded 12 years ago out of nothing. And it is a very unique institution in that it is Asia's first international liberal arts institution targeting women, particularly in underprivileged communities, and giving them an opportunity to access higher education. As you can see here, we're trying to empower and educate the next generation of women leaders, and uniquely with the liberal arts education, we're trying to teach these women critical thinking skills. A lot of them come from countries and communities, for example, filled with violence or filled with terrorism. And they're not in positions to change things yet, but if they get this higher education, we hope that they will be trained to make waves and make an impact in their communities. We have over 1,000 alumni, we're proud to say. The students come from 18 countries across Asia and the Middle East. As you can see in the bottom of this slide, we offer a 4+1 undergraduate program. The one extra is for Pathways. It's a brand new program, and we're targeting women in really marginalized communities. So for instance, as you know, there is the world's largest refugee camp in Bangladesh, coming from Myanmar, Rohingya refugees. 10% of AUW's student body today is Rohingya refugees. Wow. We also found that not only is there talent in refugee camps, there's also talent in garment factories, right? So we went to garment factory owners and said, we know there's talented women in here. Let us test them. They tested well. They entered AUW and they're thriving. And so really, really pleased about that. The majors are everything from environmental science, public health, bioinformatics, economics. And as you can see on the next slide, please, we are so proud because we've now been able to prove after 12 years that this model really works. The outcomes are tremendous. Graduation rate over 90%. By the way, in the United States, private colleges, graduation rate is 53%. Wow. So we're way above any private college in most private colleges in the United States. 75% of the women go on to work and employment, as you can see here on the list of employers, and the rest go on to graduate schools. And so, and by the way, over 80% or 85% actually return to their home countries. Even though we don't require that, they feel an obligation to give back to their communities. And that's where the multiplier effect is evident. So we're so proud of our girls, and Dr. Nirmala Rao, the current Vice Chancellor, the founder Kamal Ahmad. This really came out of a dream that Kamal had. And frankly, I don't know how we did it, but we've been able to survive. And under COVID, it's been very tough, but we were the first university in Bangladesh to go completely online. The biggest challenge was sending the girls back home. I'm sure. And if you're in Bangladesh, but you're from a refugee camp, actually the worst conditions in AUW are actually better than your home, residency in a refugee camp. So there was a lot of complications. I won't go into detail, but it's very hard to get them transferred back. But we had 90% or 95% attendance rate online. that biggest challenge was Wi-Fi connectivity. The girls in Afghanistan or Syria couldn't get enough bandwidth, but we managed to supply them with battery packs and Wi-Fi packs to enable them to do that. And I'm glad to say that in May, 95% of our students who were supposed to graduated on time.
They did.
So it's pretty close to a miracle.
Amazing, amazing. Wow. Well, what about you, Lin-san?
Thank you. I also have two very quick slides. If you can pull up the slide. So UWC, or United World College ISAK Japan, was founded in 2014 with a mission that you see at the bottom, at the top of the slide, that goes to empower each other to be transformational leaders who explore new frontiers and make a positive change today and in the future. So today, we started with very small, with only 50 students, but today we have nearly 200 high school students on our Hamburg campus in Karuizawa, Nagano, coming from over 80 countries in the world. Because we truly believe in the power of diversity, we offer a very rigorous scholarship program as well. So with about 70% of our students receive some form of financial aid. And it is our hope that our alumni will go out to the real world one day and create positive changes that will impact lives of hundreds and millions of other people, like Malala is doing. The second slide really quickly shows that we've just been recognized as one of the top 10 boarding schools in Asia, and have been featured in a number of media in and outside of Japan, including in NHK with Aiko-san there most recently, last Christmas. Yeah, so that's us in a nutshell. But when it comes to COVID-19, we have three challenges that we faced. First of all, obviously we had to go online for a while too, but the biggest challenge for us was closed borders, because our students come from over 80 countries in the world. So closed borders and restricted, the travel restrictions gave us a lot of tremendous challenges. And the second one was time zone. When we went online, when you have students from all over the world, our students were in every single time zone that you can possibly think of, and to be able to offer online program with very discussion-based, student-centered learning, through online in different time zones was a huge challenge for us too. The last one is just like Cassie then said, internet connection. For many of our students who come from countries or households with very limited internet connection, that was a challenge.
Thank you. Because both of you pointed out the challenges posed by the internet connection, but that can quickly lead to educational disparity.
Absolutely.
Even in Japan, that happens.
Japan, yeah, exactly.
In first world, in the United States as well, right? It's that digital divide, so to speak. There's a different form of digital divide,
it is.
But we have seen it exposed very, very starkly in many communities all over the world. So that's clearly an area that we all need to address together.
I understand in Japan, universities some of them are starting to give some sort of a subsidy so that the students can bear the cost of extra quality Wi-Fi connection. But that's going to be quite crucial in the new normal, it seems. Okay, thank you. And regarding girls' education in Asia, Malala stressed the need for education for girls. How would you, in your words, explain the significance for education for girls? Let me start with Lin-san.
Yeah, I think it's Kathy-san, because she's AUW is the women's university, so I think Kathy-san can.
Okay. So you said it's going to be silver bullet.
Yeah. So we're not trying to exclude the boys and the men. Of course, we need to educate the boys and the men and make sure that they're good, support, and they can work with the women. But I think it's pretty obvious to many that not only is there, just general disparities in the developing world, but in particular when it comes to education. Malala mentioned 20 million girls at risk of losing an education through early child marriage or being forced to give up their education because they have to help out at home, right? And this is so common, and we're seeing this, frankly, a lot of AUW students. Some of the students said that their parents, particularly their mothers and fathers, said, there's no way we're going to let you go to a university outside the country. You're supposed to get married by 16. And so there's a lot of societal forces at work that are really blocking these young women from realizing their full potential. But once they enter the gates of AUW and they've had this extraordinary cultural experience with various ethnicities and religions, automatically their horizons just expand, exponentially, and they understand their world is far bigger than that little microcosm that they grew up in, and they meet other women who are like, they are, amazing role models to them. They can see the world of possibilities. We have women who, for example, a young woman at our last event who is doing research in the top agricultural university in the Netherlands. And her purpose of pursuing a PhD there is because she wants to clean the polluted waters in one of the biggest rivers in India, right? She wants to solve a problem in her community, but she needs to do the research in order to make that happen. So I think we're trying to equip these women with skills and knowledge so that they can create a roadmap of sorts for themselves. They have a goal, and what does it take to reach that goal? And if I think about the challenges daily that they encounter, it's just daunting. I think I would have given up, right away. But their hanga seishin, their ambition and their drive, just makes me want to try harder myself. Right?
I'm sure. But I've covered AUW many years back when the school was being opened, and I realized that often it's not just poverty. Because in some countries and societies, girls' education is not considered as their rights.
That's right.
And Malala once said that education is often taken away from girls, not because men or rulers think that women do not deserve education or education is unimportant, but precisely because they know that education matters, and that if an educated woman can disturb the status quo and eventually become a sort of a threat. So there's a mindset issue. And there must be similar stories that you have heard at AUW.
Yes, so parents or relatives of some of these women these students have told us they have encountered a lot of pushback, right? You don't need an education. This is a foreign country. It's liberal arts. It's not like a technical university. Why are you doing that? There's a lot of pushback, but I think at the end of the day, by educating themselves, they understand that there is a huge world out there of possibility. And I think a lot of them coming from communities, whether it's refugee camps or conflict zones, they understand what are the genesis, what are the actual original causes of these problems in society, and how can I solve them? And I think maybe when they're not educated enough, they realize, shikata ga nai. They just throw up their hands and say, it can't be helped. But now that we've equipped them with some skills and some knowledge, they realize this is actually possible. And so that's really exciting and interesting to watch.
Sure. What about you, Lin-san? What stories have you heard from students who have chose to come to ISAK?
Yeah, thank you. So at our school too, there are definitely, a number of girls who do not have access to quality education if they were back in their home countries. A girl from Tajikistan, for example, she was bullied just trying to go to middle school, and she had to get out of the village where the girls were just not permitted, or were not. It wasn't deemed to be necessary for girls to go to even middle school. And there are other girls from India or even like MENA region, Middle East and North Africa regions, where she was the first and only girl in a family to come to high school with a scholarship. So some students actually come through after like 400 times competition.
Wow.
There's one slot in Libya, for example, and she was chosen out of 400 applicants. And that's how disparate they are to get an access to this kind of education of third countries.
One more question to you, Lin-san. Kathy mentioned that girls, students often learn from each other because of the diversity in the classroom, from what country or what background they come from. What is the significance of the diversity of students in schools, do you think? What do they learn from each other?
Yeah, thank you. So we believe that diversity is best felt and understood and embraced when they live together. And that's why we are intentionally for residential. And I think through living with students from 80 countries in the world, our students get to experience that, there are different religions, and they know that in their heads, right? But they know that, there are different religions, cultural habits, or historical beliefs, or in socioeconomic diversity that exists in the world, and that the diversity is real. And for example, there's a room with a Hong Kongese student and again, I think this was Afghan student. They both stood in front of the laundry machine, the Japanese laundry machine, and both of them didn't know how to operate them. The Hong Kongese student never had to touch a laundry machine because he has a helper, and an Afghan boy, obviously in his village, doesn't even have electricity. And that's the diversity in this world. And that's what they live every day. And I think that's a part of residential schools that with a true diversity.
True. And I heard that sometimes they cook some exotic foods for friends.
And set a fire alarm going. They do.
Wow.
And they pray at different times. And we actually didn't used to have any praying room, but because our rooms are all quite four persons room, they had to find a way to navigate that somehow. And in the end, students asked the school to establish a praying room where people can pray at any time freely. And those things come from students.
Wow.
Living a diverse student body.
And what about you, about diversity?
Yeah,
Kathy?
So I wanted to share a story that was with one of our earlier classes of girls, and we had a fairly significant cohort from Sri Lanka. And as many of you may know, in Sri Lanka, there has been a long-standing civil war in the country between the Tamil and the Sinhalese. And when we AUW decided rooming assignments, everybody rooms with other women, the decision was to deliberately put somebody who is from the Sinhalese group with a Tamil girl, both from Sri Lanka, put them in the same room, and these girls talked about that experience. And it was so interesting because they said, when I was assigned to this room, I said, no way, I grew up being taught that girl is a terrorist, right? And the other girl said the same thing to her. And over time, they came to understand that, wait a minute, we're actually exactly the same. We're both human beings. They got to understand mutually what the other side believed. And I think through that process of mutual understanding, they gained peace, right? And to me, that's where peace starts, is people-to-people relationships, mutual understanding, and particularly at that young age, to me, is so crucial to build in. And so I love that story because I think it just encapsulates, what the magic of AUW is all about, is creating that peace, creating those relationships at a very young age. And so you just multiply that with multiple ethnicities and nationalities. And you've got an incredible network of women who are just so tightly knit. And it's so wonderful.
I might sound naive, but I tend to think that world peace starts from there, really.
That's right. I think so, yeah.
Now, in the video, Malala mentioned the importance of education and that it's not just about reading and writing. And I think she was talking about quality education, not just alphabets and maths. So Kathy, what is the importance of quality education, like STEM education?
Yeah, very critical. I think that it goes without saying that if we think about the world today and how rapidly the whole world is being disrupted by innovation and new technologies in every single country, And so going forward, if we all know that, whether it's AI or automation, we know that a lot of the labor-intensive jobs are actually going to be lost. And who does a lot of these labor-intensive jobs? It tends to be more women than men, unfortunately. So unless we equip these young girls and women with digital skills, retool them so that they're able to cope in that new digital era, unfortunately, they're going to be left behind, right? So I think our emphasis at AUW on a lot of the sciences, and in fact, we don't have to tell the girls, that's actually what they want to study, which is really good to see. And COVID, for instance, has triggered a huge surge of interest in public health, right? And you think, COVID is bad in first world countries, or developed countries. Think about in some of these countries where these girls are coming from. It is really, really daunting, right? The crises there. So their willingness to get out of their comfort zone and explore different disciplines, and in an interdisciplinary way, I think is going to help equip them for, I think it's all about building resilience, right? Lynn, you're building, students who are also they're every day facing challenges, whether it's a laundry machine or, making food, but their bigger challenges they're going to encounter their entire lives. But building resilient and students that have grit, I think is really the mission.
Lin-san, do you have anything to add to what Kathy-san said?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really interested in STEM education for girls lately, and especially when I was looking into some statistics. If you look at the World Economic Forum gender gap ranking, the top 4 countries, I think Iceland, Norway, Finland, and Sweden, I think if you look at their PISA score, the OECD PISA World Test score in maths, those 4 countries where the girls perform much better than boys in all 4 countries by far. And if you look at Japan, the girls fall behind more than 10 points. It used to be more like 20 points, but now we're falling about 10 points behind boys. And that's we see where we are as Japan. And so for Japan, for example, access to education for girls is not too big of an issue at the moment, no longer an issue at the moment. But if you look at the kind of education that they have access to, especially in math and STEM subjects, it is still a challenge. And I think that is translated into the wage gap. For example, we know that Japan's labor force, the female labor force did increase by 3 million, more than 3 million, but still the wage gap is there very clearly. And throughout COVID-19, last year, the number of suicides among women, or number of lost jobs and unemployment among women has really increased, because of the limited fields that our girls are educated in and we're working in. So I think STEM education, even in Japan, is critically important for girls.
Right. And Lin-san, you say education is about transforming the society, and that it is crucial to nurture leaders. What do you tell your students at school? What is the message that you convey to them regarding becoming a leader?
Yeah, thank you, Aiko-san. So, I think we intentionally put the word transformational in front of leader, when we talk about a school mission. Because, I think until a few decades ago, the changes in the world were made by, large organizations or large corporations, or governments. And we used to almost depend on them to improve the state of the world. But I think times have changed, and the world's problems are becoming more and more complex, and simultaneously the solutions are becoming more complex and less straightforward. So I think we're in serious need for unconventional leaders and unconventional ideas and approaches to tackle those challenges and opportunities that they lay us before. So it is our humble hope that our students will believe in being the change you want to see in the world, as Mahatma Gandhi said once, and instead of relying on others to change it for you. So that's the kind of type of leader that we hope our students to be.
Now, whether it be men or women, what kind of leaders are needed in the current world, do you think?
Yes, I think, as I said, I think the notion of leaders have really changed or is changing. And I know leaders used to be perceived as title or position, but it is a practice that everyone can practice. Leadership is a practice, we tell our students. And no matter how small the challenge is that you're tackling today, you have to start somewhere. And if you keep doing that, you will move a mountain. And I think we always ask our students to ask yourselves what is most important to you, and ask the world what is most needed. And when the answers to those two questions meet, you end up moving a mountain. And you don't necessarily want to become a leader, but you end up being a leader, moving a mountain. If you continuously ask those two questions to yourself and to the world.
Okay. And that can be started from day one, today.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, let's move on to some questions from the fellow. The first question comes from Ambes R. Ocampo, who is Professor of History at Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines, who is the ALFP Fellow, Asia Leadership Fellows Program at iHouse. The question is, education has always been seen as a driver for positive and lasting change. While the pandemic changed the way education was delivered, online classes, how effective do you think this is in relation for the human need for physical socialization or engagement? In what area can we improve on education online? So who likes to start?
Well, I guess I can go.
Thank you.
The things, for us, it was inevitable that we had to go online. And not only we had to offer online classes to our own students, we said, there's risk, the challenges are opportunities too. So we said, why don't we take in this opportunity, start something new? So we started actually offering online classes to non-ISAK students called ISAK X. So we gathered students from all over the world who are interested in ISAK type of education. And this is completely online, only weekends only, online. And obviously, I think the residential piece is not there, but I think we have been able to offer very interactive education, and with lots of different perspectives brought from all around the world, from students from multiple backgrounds. We also offer scholarships to those online students as well. So I think that is to say that obviously online learning cannot completely replace in-class learning, or let alone the residential experience piece. But I think there's a hope, and I think through online we can actually reach more and more students around the world. So I think I see a lot of potential there.
Okay. Kathy, and what about you? We spoke about the costs that comes with online education, but what about missing the physical socialization part of it?
Yeah, we heard that a lot of our students really missed, that community and that very close, intimate interactions daily with the faculty, and that's very hard to replace, obviously, when you're flung back to your home communities and countries. But at the same time, just like Lynn pointed out with ISAK, we also uncovered some surprising opportunities. For instance, we developed a mentoring program. We had some mentoring going on before, but we were able to engage large companies who, for example, in Goldman Sachs's case, we used to do a lot of in-person charity work, volunteer activities, for example, here in Japan and in the rest of Asia. Since that was really constrained under COVID, we decided, okay, how about online mentorship opportunities for our employees? And that proved to be very effective and very impactful for the students to learn about different career opportunities and paths and challenges that people experience. So I think turning these crises into opportunities, and hopefully we don't go back to our old routines and old bad habits. We can actually take some of those opportunities and lessons learned and take advantage of those and extend them forward.
True, so true. And the next question comes from Yuki Suzuki, Principal YUBU Camp, Trustee CISV. He is also a Nitobe Leadership Fellow at the iHouse. The question is, given the challenges posed to education in Japan and other countries, what do you think is most necessary to reform education system? This is a hard question and sort of a follow-up on your whole point, Kathy.
We might need 3 more hours, Lynn.
The lesson would be not to go back to the old normal, perhaps.
I think, if we think about what I said earlier about how rapidly this world is transforming and advancing and being disrupted, we need to think about, well, is our 21st century model of education the right model? I think all countries are kind of grappling with this system I was actually talking to my 20-year-old daughter 2 nights ago about this model of everybody gets on this escalator. We have to get into the best, kindergartens, to get in the best elementary schools, to go to the best universities, to go to be hired by the top companies. Is that really, that old model going to be fitting, for the future? So I don't know the answer. Lynn is much more of an expert than I am, but I think the world is ripe for different options.
Right,
I'm not saying
right.
the current path is the wrong one. I'm just saying I don't think it's for every single student. I think every human, our son is an artist, so, for example, so does the traditional mode of education fit somebody like him, right? Or in Germany, for instance, they have schools that are alternative to universities that are teaching crafts. So you can learn to be an electrician or a plumber. And there's a lot of pride in those jobs, right? That kind of thing, I think we need to think about more flexible and alternative modes of education.
So maybe we are still in the process of transforming into something else in terms of education.
Yeah, I hope. Yeah.
What about you, Lin-san?
Yeah, what is most needed for educational reform? That's another very big question, as Kathy said. I think there's what and how that we can talk about. And in terms of what, I tend to talk about Japan's case because I'm not too familiar with other countries' educational reforms that are going on. But for our country, I think what is very critical is teacher reform, and especially in primary and secondary education. And unless we all know, if you're in education, unless teachers change, nothing changes in schools, and nothing changes in education. So I think there are many ways to approach this, but I think deregulations of teacher license, for example, or maybe administering it with more flexibility, I think is a very huge key for our country's education reform. And when it comes to how, I think Japan or in any other countries, the governments are not too fast in reacting to change, for good reasons. And so I think, especially in the field of education, I think it is very important that we show by example. What I'm trying to say there is that seeing is believing. In education, you can talk a lot of abstract ideas, but unless you see that happening in actual classroom or actual teacher hiring, for example, you don't get it. So I think the key in how is to start very small with a very specific success example. And when we see that, the government can actually implement it into regulations or deregulations. So I think what is teacher reform and how, I think, is starting small, but a specific example of success.
Thank you. Another question from Don Sun, professor at School of Foreign Languages of Nanjing University of Finance and Economics, who is also ALFP fellow. She says, how do you deal with religious issues in schools? Do you have any measures to safeguard religious freedom and ensure the safety of students? Shall I start with Lin-san?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, as I introduced earlier, we do have praying rooms that are interfaith. No matter what your religion is, you're free to obviously pray for your religion. And also we have constant interfaith workshops where we introduce different religions and learn to embrace and appreciate everyone else's values.
Okay. What about you, Kathy?
Same with AUW, because I think somebody's faith and set of beliefs is part of their individual persona. And if we're respecting diversity, of language and of culture and of ethnicity, it goes without saying that one should also respect their beliefs. And so we ensure that we have a lot of classes and opportunities, I guess, for the girls to share not only their cultures and their languages and their cooking, but also why they believe what they believe. So we have women from the Islamic faith to Christianity to Buddhism. And again, like you said earlier, it all begins with, peace is created because you understand, you hear out the other side. I am from a country called America, which all of us know is very divided right now. And I fear that, or I think I personally that a lot of that division is rooted in the fact that a lot of people in my society are not willing to listen to the other side, or that we associate, if they don't agree with me, they're my enemy, right? And that is the beginning of the end, right? So I think particularly for youth and young people, absolutely this is a necessary thing to respect religious beliefs, to understand why that person believes what they do. Even if you disagree, you agree to disagree, but you hear them out and you listen.
And it sort of goes back to our early conversation about diversity, because it's really about respecting the differences.
Absolutely. And I think, again, diversity is such a big loaded word, but at the end of the day, this is the world. You can't cut it out. Everybody has their own backgrounds, their own personal stories, their religious beliefs. But that's what makes the world so rich. And frankly, from that diversity, sometimes that can cause tension. And I often say that in Japan's context, it's so uncomfortable to have to speak English in the company, or you've got a woman in a full room full of men and it's so uncomfortable. But in fact, that's the seed of innovation and creativity, isn't it? And that triggers growth and that triggers opportunity. So to me, that's really the key. If we can embrace diversity because it's a positive thing instead of a negative.
Right. And I think we have had so many questions from the audience as we speak, and also from those audiences who registered in advance with questions. And the first question is to you, Kathy, it seems. What would be the biggest impact the alumni of the AUW would bring to society and the community?
Wow, it's hard to answer one answer, but for example, I mentioned that 10% of our student body are Rohingya refugees, and I'm very proud to say that we have over 20 graduates of AUW who are actually working for UNHCR or Oxfam or the World Food Program in the world's largest refugee camp called Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. So to me, these women are taking the education and the skills they've gained at AUW and putting them to work. With one woman who we had recently at our event, she was in charge of organizing for the World Food Program, meals for everybody. And of course, with COVID, it became very tricky, right? You can't just take a plate and get all your food. It had to be boxed. So how are you going to prepare boxed food or separate that so to ensure that it's sanitary or whatever? So these women are daily facing challenges that they have to solve. They're problem solvers. But to me, just hearing these women talk about their daily work lives and the challenges that they're overcoming, they're real problem solvers, and they know that they're having an impact, and that motivates them. These are really tough conditions, as you can imagine. These are 24, 25-year-old women, fresh out of college, and boom, they're working in a refugee camp night and day. But they are so inspiring and motivated, and they know that they're affecting change, and that's what keeps them going.
Thank you. And the next question is to Lin-san. What kind of measures did you take for students from abroad when they could not move across borders? If some of the students live in an environment where online education cannot be provided, how do you select students from Japan? There are many questions in one question. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. So when the borders were closed, our students were scattered all over the world, and again, in all sorts of different time zones. I think we did a few things to counter that challenge. Again, for the students who have very limited internet connection, where this video chat was no longer available, our faculty had actually set a separate class for those students who had to just go back and forth with assignments with emails, and some other students, in that region would actually go and help those students as well. So there are lots going on for online learning. And then what was their second question? How do we select Japanese students?
Yes.
Yeah. So we don't have separate criteria for Japanese or domestic or foreign students. We believe in 4 facets of transformational leadership, and that's what we base our admission criteria on. So first one is obviously embracing and celebrating diversity, or using diversity as strength, as I guess Kathy said. And the second one is identifying what is most important and needed. So instead of being given the question or problem, you have to be able to identify the problems that needs to be solved. So that's the number 2. Number 3, ability to face challenges or obstacles. And the fourth one is supporting others in those 3 practices. So those are the 4 traits or facets of leadership that we look for in any of the candidates, applicants. We actually just finished our 7th or 8th admission season. And with all the pandemic and closed borders and travel restrictions, domestic and international applications grew. And there are more than 6 times more applicants than we could possibly take into our school. So hopefully, if the borders open again, we'll have a very good start of the new year, new school year.
Okay. The next question is about leadership. What is leadership? If everyone becomes a leader, who is going to decide and make an agreement? I have heard that followership is also one way of leadership. What are your thoughts? What about you, Kathy?
Yes, I think that's a good question. And again, I think it goes back to Lin-san's earlier comments about the definition of leadership, I think, has changed a lot. And so it's not like this, president or prime minister or CEO, shacho, those are the only, definitions of leaders. That's clearly not the case. And I think in all of our respective circles or communities, we have lots of examples of young students. They don't have to be Malala or Greta Thunberg, but they're affecting change. And they're just calling on their friends, hey, let's have a bake sale, or let's help these kids who can't afford, Wi-Fi. Let's help them with mentorship and tutoring. Leadership, to me, is so multidimensional and can be exercised and practiced in so many ways. But I think that if everybody can think that they can drive change, they identify a problem and they can solve that problem somehow, and they get their friends to go along, that's leadership, right? Doesn't have to have a title or
right. Lin-san, would you be able to elaborate on your previous point on leadership?
Thank you. As just like Kathy said, I think leadership, the notion of leadership has really been changing. And, I said earlier that it is not a title position, but a practice that everyone can do. And I think in addition to that, and as I sort of introduced earlier, when I named those 4 facets, you realize that the 4th one is actually supporting others in those practices. Right. So I think, the question I mentioned followership as a part of leadership. And I think I believe in that. I think many of us have seen that YouTube video where, this crazy in the park. And then for a while, people are like, who is this crazy person? And the second guy, takes off his shirt and then starts dancing. And then after that, a whole mountain, a whole hill a park is full of dancing people, and the people are dancing. And I think that second person played a critical role, instead of, who is that crazy guy? He's like, that sounds like that looks fun. And let me just join you. And I think that followership is very important too. And, just to repeat and reiterate Kathy's point, everyone has his or her own way of practicing leadership.
Right.
And I think if everyone can find that and have a sense of ownership and possibility, I think we can together collectively make a positive change in the world.
Right. Can start from something very small, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it can start from our daily lives, and you know what the questions that we have in our communities, or in our families and households, or schools, or in organizations. We can start somewhere.
True.
And then once you take a step forward, step outside our comfort zone, you go, oh, that wasn't that hard, and then you can then take the next step, and a second, third, fourth step, and collectively that would really start moving a mountain.
I think some questions have come in live from our chat. This question is about the mental health. How has your school or university looked after your students' mental health amidst this pandemic? Kathy, would you be able to respond?
Yes, so very important topic. I would say that AUW, though, had to deal with mental health issues well before COVID, because remember, many of these women are coming from refugee camps or conflict zones, or they're coming from family units that they didn't fully endorse or. So we've had in place for some time infrastructure of counseling, of therapy for these women. They live in very tight quarters. They're basically in, right now, leased buildings. They're kind of packed in like sardines because we continue to grow 15% a year. So inevitably, we're going to be encountering mental health challenges. So we are putting a super high priority on this. I can't say we're where we need to be. And COVID, of course, has made this whole situation more complicated, but that is absolutely a very high priority for us.
Lin-san, how are you coping with the situation?
Again, mental health has been a huge challenge for us, our community too. It was something that we thought was very important even before the COVID-19. But through the pandemic, or because of the pandemic, two things happened. First of all, we had to go through a lot of quarantine periods because students arrived in different batches with different border situations. And when something happens on campus, they have to go quarantine again. So for teenagers of that age, high school students to be quarantined for 2 weeks is hard. So maintaining their mental health during that period is very difficult, has been very challenging. And also online, the counselors, they used to meet face to face, but when they're quarantined, they can't. So the online, the counseling session had to go online as well.
Right.
So I can't say that we have managed this perfectly well, but we are striving to be better.
And I think this will be our last question. It's about the private sector's role. In order to prioritize or help facilitate the speed for educational equity or reform, what can private corporations or public sectors do to help? I think it's not just about the funding, but understanding and things. What about you, Kathy?
Yeah, I think other than providing greater access for educational opportunities for those who don't have necessarily that access to begin with, thinking about how are private sector companies recruiting? Are they only going to the top universities? Are they looking for this sort of cookie cutter mold of a recruit? Or do they need to think more expansively and with greater breadth about, okay, like I said before, what talent, what human capital do we need to have to grow to the next level? And I think every company in the world right now, frankly, is facing this dilemma because it was sort of all atarimae. Okay, if we just pick the cream of the crop from the best schools, boom, we're guaranteed the best quality talent. But that's not the world anymore. And I think the other dimension we have to remember is that I'm a Showa Jidai, old woman now, but the younger generation, the millennials, my children are 24 and 20, and they look at the world in a very, very different light. They want to know, okay, so if I work at this company, what's this company's purpose? What is their mission? It's not about just a paycheck. It's about what impact are they having on society. So for example, they are worried about things like, oh, does the CEO care about diversity? Do they discriminate against people? Or is my company, how are they in terms of carbon neutrality or CO2 emissions? I don't think in my generation we cared about any of that. We were looking for companies to work in, but this generation absolutely does care. So I think putting all that together, the private sector does really need to be very mindful about that.
True. Lin-san, time is also up, but please let us know if you have any thing to add.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you. Very briefly, and it really similar to what Kathy-san's first point. I think if the corporations, a lot of them say that they value diversity, but when you look at their hiring process or even promotion process, it doesn't reflect that. So I think saying we value diversity is one thing, but if you can really hire people from diverse backgrounds and actually promote and celebrate the diverse ideas and employees, I think that would really have a trickle-down effect to the education system as well.
Okay. Well, I think we should wrap up here, and my takeaway would be that education is really about building the future together, and that it shouldn't be a luxury, and not investing in education means losing our future. So really, we don't have any time to lose here. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Lin-san, for being with us. And I do hope you keep up the excellent work. And big thank you from all of us for the questions the audience have sent to us. So thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Lin-san. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. ありがとうございました。楽しかったです。
ありがとうございます。And a small announcement from me. This series was made possible by Asia Society Japan Center, Mitsubishi UFJ Research and Consulting, Shahani Associates, the Japan Foundation Asia Center, MRA Foundation, Tanaka UK Japan Educational Foundation. An announcement for the next session, which will be next Friday, January the 29th, 6 p.m. Japan time, on geopolitics and technology. And the speaker would be Mr. Parag Khanna, who is founder of Future Map, which is data and scenario-based strategic advisory firm. So please join us again next week. And all of you, please keep safe and healthy. Thank you and goodbye from Tokyo.